Have you ever found yourself tuning into a sporting event at just the right second, as an athlete is about to break a world record? Did you feel the significance of that moment? What does it take to get to such an elite level? Many would say practice and hard work, and they're right. But what most elite athletes, artists, and businessmen will tell you is that excellence is not an individual pursuit. If it was not for someone else believing in them, identifying their talent, and walking alongside of them, helping to develop their skills, that none of their success could be possible. It is often said that we all stand on the shoulders of giants. So how willing are you to lift someone up onto your shoulders?
In the New Testament of the Bible, Jesus lays out his plan for how a tax collector, some fishermen, and a few other average guys are going to take his message of hope and salvation to the entire world. And it didn't involve a military coup or a clever strategy for mass producing a bunch of followers. It really started with a very simple phrase: go and make disciples. Jesus says in Matthew 28, 19 and 20, some of the last words he said was, go, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. And be sure of this, I'll be with you until the very end of the age. So what is discipleship? It's not a word that we use in our workplace or around our dinner table. But you see, if you existed at the time of Jesus, you would know exactly what discipleship is. And understanding this idea points to understanding how Jesus was so incredibly successful at accomplishing what he came here to do. Paul was one of the first followers of Jesus. In his lifetime, he started dozens of churches in all kinds of different countries all over the known world at his time. And as his life was winding down, he decided to write a letter to one of the young men that he had poured into along the way. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, we see some of the final instructions that he gave to Timothy. What he says there, in essence, is, take what I've told you in the presence of many witnesses. I want you to entrust that to faithful men who will then be able to go and take that and give it to others as well. In other words, don't let this stop with you. This is the process that Jesus set in motion from the very beginning to bring his message to everybody. It's a process of intentionality, of high access, of witnessing someone's mistakes and their successes, and learning the lessons necessary to be like that person as they are like Jesus. It involves a lot of time. It involves a commitment. But when it's done right, the movement of Jesus continues in the lives of men and women who take the baton and carry it forward into the next generation. This whole idea became real to me when I was about 14 years old. I went from being someone who read the Bible and had studied it and went to church every week to somebody that didn't even know if God existed. And around that time, an older guy stepped into my life. He was about 10 years older than I was. And he began allowing me access to his life, to watch how he was living. Up until then, the Bible was kind of an idea. It was a lot of head knowledge. It was a lot of memorization. But when I started seeing the Bible lived out in the decisions that this person was making, everything kind of changed. I watched the way that he interacted with his wife and how he dealt with disagreements. I watched the way that he played with his children on the floor and how he gave them grace and mercy and forgiveness and love and brought happiness and joy to his family. I watched how he dealt with tragedy, how he dealt with setbacks, how he dealt with triumph, with good news. I watched the way he lived his life, and I followed him as he followed Jesus. He wasn't perfect. He made all kinds of mistakes, but he told me about them. He was transparent and honest about his shortcomings, and I was able to learn from those too. When I made my own mistakes, he didn't let me off the hook. He made me confront and face them so that I could learn from them and so that I could follow Jesus closer because of them. Once I had my own wife and I had my own kids, I found that I was doing a lot of the same things he did and saying a lot of the same things he said, not because I remembered, but because they had become a part of me. I was more like Jesus for being more like him. What's really interesting for me to realize is it didn't start with him. Years ago, before I ever met him, somebody had emptied themselves into him to help him develop in his walk with Christ and who he was supposed to be. And so he had something when we got into a relationship that he could pour into me. And since then, I've had the opportunity to pour it into others. In this unbroken chain of one person developing another. This started all the way back with Jesus and his 12 disciples.
What if your life's greatest achievements are still to come? What if they aren't actually achievements at all? What if they're people? Jesus showed us that it only takes one person to start a movement that changes the world. When we open our lives to one another, having the courage to be vulnerable, and intentionally develop those that follow us, God's kingdom expands. Today, God is inviting you into that movement. He wants to use your gifts, ideas, passions, successes, and failures to intentionally grow the next generation of world changers. The only question is this: will you let him?